Hi, I'm Jenny. This is my channel Designs with Paper, and I am so glad you found me. I have another gnome card for you today. I am still in love with the gnomes. I did pick up the Simon Says Stamp Gnome House die. I think that's the name of it. And I just love the card. A little bit of stamping, a little bit of coloring, a little bit of die cutting, and it just turned out super, super cute. So let's get over there and watch the video. Thanks for stopping by. So for the card today, I'm using a couple of different die sets. I'll be using this Simon Says Stamp Mushroom Gnome House. I have a Lawn Fawn Stitched Mountains die. And I'm also using this Old Fisker's Grass Punch. I couldn't find my grass dies. I did eventually find them, but they were lost on the piles on my desk. So I have all the pieces to this gnome house cut out, and I am backing these windows with some yellow cardstock. I wanted to do that so it would look like there was a light on in the gnome house. Using a little bit of Tombow glue and some scrap cardstock, and just kind of holding that in place until the glue starts to bond. While I let that glue adhere or dry a little bit, I put a piece of tape on the back of this mushroom cap so that I can add the little white accent pieces back in. And it took me a minute to figure out which way they went in and then to get them turned right around between my fingernails and this pickup stick or the sticky tool thing. It was a bit of a process. Now that the windows have adhered, I'm going to add these frames back in. One thing I probably should have done before I started adhering things was adding my shading. I didn't think about that when I was busy crafting. I just was kind of, I knew what I kind of wanted to do, and I turned on the camera to film it to see if it would be good footage for a video. So I'm just being really, really careful here and coloring in that window trim with a brown Copic marker. I think it's an E29. I used the browns that I used for the shading on this mushroom house were the E29 family. Or the E2 family. So I started the darkest with the E29, and I'm just doing the trim around the windows, and then I will go ahead and do the trim on the door with that same brown marker as well. I did grab a piece of scrap paper so that I didn't get Copic marker all over my coloring mat, because it's black, or my craft mat rather, it's black. I wouldn't be able to see it, and then it'd end up with Copic ink someplace I didn't really want it. I do that occasionally. End up with smears places I don't want them. Go figure. So now that I have the trim colored in, I am going to add some texture to this front door, and I don't really want it to blend. I am using, oh my goodness, English is hard today, some long streaks just to create a texture to the door. I'm not really going for a wood door per se. It's a little bit too, I don't know, not random enough for wood, but just a texture look. And I using the E29, E27, E25, I think, on the door. I will adhere a piece of tape to the back of that door so that I can add the doorknob little piece back into its hole. And then I will color that also with that E29 so that it is the darkest shade of brown, same as the window trim and the door trim. Now I've decided that since I've added color to the door and the windows, the house must need some shading as well. So I have pulled out my warm browns, and I think I started here with like a W4 maybe. And my idea here, or my plan here, was just to do the edges so that the house itself looked round or dimensional. And I went from the E4 up to an E6, or it could have been an E3 to an E5. Like I said, I didn't write them down. I was just kind of in a play mode, not a focused play mode. There is a difference, right? So I will go back and forth with these two E-brown or E-gray markers, the warm grays. My goodness, my brain is not filtering the right information today. So sorry. And once I have that put together, I like how that looks, but I don't really like the edges. So I've taken the colorless blender, and I'm just kind of blending out those edges so they don't have the same severe brush strokes that the door has. Now I have pulled out a W8 to do some shading on the edge of this mushroom cap to kind of do the same thing, give it some dimension and some texture and just make it look a little bit round or rounded. And I kind of played with this a bit. I went back and forth. I went down the warm gray colors. Skipping. I don't hardly ever use my grays right in a row. I usually skip. So if I start on a 6, I'll go to a 4. Or if I start on a 3, I go to a 1. And I'm just kind of playing with it. And then I left it alone for a minute to see if it would blend back in. I did use some E20s, low 20s, to add some dimension to those highlight marks on the roof of the gnome house, on the mushroom cap. And I decided that I needed to fill this in a little bit more. There was not quite enough shading for as big a space as that is. And it just needed a little bit more dimension. Plus, I needed to soften the edges a bit. So here I have the snow caps to my mountains, and you can't really see them on my scrap paper. But I wanted to take a very light violet. It's a V02 or a BV02, and just do the edges of this snow to give it a shadow. You know, I'm not trying to color the snow purple, just wanted it to be shadowy. And I've cut the mountains with a dark blue and a light purple. And I'll figure out which of these peaks are going to get the snow and adhere them on. Sorry, I have a lot of ums in my vocabulary today. I'm not sure what's up with that. I tried really hard to avoid that, and it is not working today. So now I have those snow caps, or the snow peaks, glued to the top of the mountains, and I'm just kind of figuring out what comes next. Well, I decided since the mountain tops were stitched, I needed to add some stitching to the mountains as well. So, or the mountain sides and bottom as well. So I've pulled out my long spawn stitch rectangle dies, and I will be trimming down the sides of the mountains. Now, I probably should not have cut the panels the exact size that I wanted and then tried to add the stitching. It did take a minute to line up that die. But I had, when I started this practice, I was going to do like a trifold card. And so I cut everything down to size so it would fit. And then once I got it all cut out and assembled, I glued it on upside down. I could not believe that I had, so it opened weird and I didn't like how it opened. So it is not a trifold card. You know, spoiler alert, not a trifold card. I will use this same stitch rectangle die and cut down these grass pieces I have cut. And this lighter green one, I actually end up cutting even a little bit smaller after I cut the card base apart that did not work out. So here I am lining up the mountains on a piece of just scrap paper. And I'm going to put the mountain peaks where I want them. And then I will pull my trimmer out and measure from the highest mountain peak 5.5 inches. And then just trim the bottom off. And I'm not super concerned about the fact that the bottom edge no longer has that stitch line because the grass does. So now I have the grass layer adhered, and I'm going to take my mushroom house, my little gnome house, and add some 3M foam tape. I forgot what it was called. How can I forget what that thing is called? I'm adding some 3M foam tape to the back of this mushroom house so that it will kind of pop off the front of the hills a little bit, kind of bring it more forward and push those hills farther into the background. And I'm just adding some little fidgety pieces here so that it all sticks down. The foam tape will also help keep that tape I put on the back to hold all the pieces together kind of in place, so it won't start to pop apart, I hope. Cross my fingers, knock on wood. So here is my little gnome house, and this is after I have cut it off of that card base that did not work, and I've trimmed down this other piece of grass, and it's cut into 2 pieces because, well, I messed it up, but I'm going to make it work. And I'm adding this skinny little piece of grass down to the bottom of the front of the gnome house. And now I have grabbed the Simon Says Stamp Spring Gnome dies, and I'm just going to color and cut out one little gnome. I think he's kind of cute. He's a little bit smaller than some of the other Simon Says Stamp gnome dies. And sorry, the stamping is a little bit off screen. I apologize. I'm just using some Copic markers. Not a lot of blending space to blend, so I'm using just 2, sometimes 3 shades to blend this together. And I've got a light and a dark green for the grass. I'm using some E11 and E14s for his nose and his hands. I will then go on to the butterfly. And for the butterfly, I have started in the next to it. Well, I did his body first, and then after his body, I added a YR, I think about a 7, and then I blended that out with a Y, just so that it would kind of blend together. And I think it was a Y19 and a YR7. So I've got this orange and yellow blend together, and I did the same thing on the butterfly on his hat brim, just so that they kind of look like they went together. Now, I do realize that this is a spring gnome, and there are mountains with snow on them. But if you go to places like Utah and Wyoming and Idaho, the mountains, especially Wyoming and Colorado, the mountains have snow peaks on them long after the butterflies come out. I don't actually know if Wyoming and Colorado get butterflies, but we're just going with this here. We're just going to make it work. I am coloring in his beard with the warm grays again. I want it to read mostly white, so I use just the 0 and the 02. I am coloring in his hat with some greens. These are like a dark teal. I think it is the BG90 family, so that it's more of a teal green than a green green. And I'm doing the same thing with his shirt. Now his shoes, I'm just going to color in a gray. There's not much real estate there to really blend out. I did spend some time on his hat and his clothing because there was a little bit more blendable space. And these colors, while they're in the same color family, there is a big gap, and so you do kind of have to blend them together. They do blend well once you get them all blended together. For the trim on his hat and the cuffs of his sleeves, I used the cool grays to add the shadows to those. I tend to use cool grays for non-living things and warm grays for living things. Just that's my brain's differentiation. So now I will go ahead and fussy cut this gnome out. I do not have the dies for this set, and I did not want to pull my scan and cut out for one stamp image. Once he's cut out, I will take a black fine tip Sharpie and just go around the edges with the Sharpie on the back side, so that if I miss, I get Sharpie line on the back of the stamped image, not that cute gnome I just spent the last few minutes coloring. It is a little bit fidgety to get in all those little places, but now I have this super cute gnome, and I'm going to attach him to the front of this card, right there where the grass was cut in half from when I was trying to attach it to that weird fold card that I tried to do. So, here is my card front. I am still super, super in love with the Simon Says Stamped Gnomes. I find them just super, super cute. I decided to go ahead and add a sentiment to this, and I am going to use the sentiment that says, missing you no much. And I think after the last year, there's a lot of people in our lives that we really are missing. We haven't seen a lot of people. We've been attempting to keep our circles really small to kind of help this pandemic wear itself out. And now as things start to open back up, we're ready to start seeing those people again. So I thought it was perfect. I am going to use this Avriel sentiment strip die to cut that out. And I will just tape that down and run it through my die cut machine, which is off to my left-hand side. Not on my desk because it makes my desk wiggly. And I am going to adhere that right here to the underneath side or the edge side of that mushroom cap, just because it looks a little bit like a welcome sign or a house sign. Thanks so much for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed the card. Have a great day. Thanks so much for stopping by my channel today. Please leave me a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for stopping by.